The grand mansion stood at the edge of the city, its marble floors gleaming, its chandeliers sparkling like frozen rain. To the outside world, it was a palace of success, a monument to wealth and power. But inside those polished walls lived a man who trusted no one. His name was Edward Lawrence, a millionaire who had built his fortune with his own hands but lost something along the way: faith in people. Years of betrayal from business partners, friends, and even family had hardened his heart. So when he hired staff to care for his home, he watched them all closely, convinced that everyone was out for his money. Among the staff was Maria, a quiet maid in her late 20s. She wore no jewelry, spoke softly, and worked tirelessly. She never asked for favors, never complained, and never gave Edward reason to doubt her. Yet Edward, bound by suspicion, believed she too would one day betray him, and so he devised a cruel test. One evening, before leaving for a meeting, Edward deliberately left the door of his massive safe slightly open. Inside lay stacks of cash, glittering jewels, and documents worth more than some people would ever see in their lifetimes. He instructed his hidden cameras to record every angle, determined to expose Maria's true nature. As he drove away, he told himself it was necessary, that he needed proof of loyalty. Maria arrived the next morning to find the safe ajar. Her eyes widened at the sight of the treasures within. She stepped closer, her reflection trembling in the polished steel. For a long moment, she just stared. Any other person might have reached for the money, even a small bundle, certain no one would notice. But Maria didn't move. Instead, she dropped to her knees and began cleaning around the safe, dusting carefully as though the wealth meant nothing to her. Then she did something unexpected. She pulled a small folded envelope from her pocket, hesitated, and slipped it inside the safe before gently closing the heavy door. She sighed as if releasing a burden and returned to her chores as though nothing had happened. Hours later, Edward returned, eager to review the footage. He watched intently as Maria discovered the open safe. He expected to see greed in her eyes, a trembling hand reaching for forbidden riches, but what he saw instead made his breath catch. She hadn't taken a single coin. She had left something behind. His heart raced as he rushed to the safe, ignoring the piles of wealth and grabbing the envelope Maria had placed there. With trembling hands, he opened it. Inside was a worn piece of paper, edges frayed from years of folding and unfolding. Written in delicate handwriting was a prayer. "Lord, thank you for giving me honest work. Help me resist temptation, for my dignity is worth more than gold. Protect my daughter while I am away, and bless the hands that provide for us." Edward's vision blurred as tears filled his eyes. He sank into the chair, the paper trembling in his grasp. All his life he had believed loyalty was an illusion, that kindness was just a mask people wore until greed revealed their true faces. But Maria, the woman he had doubted, had proved him wrong without even knowing it. The next morning, Edward confronted her, not with anger, but with quiet intensity. "Maria," he said softly, holding out the note, "why did you put this in my safe?" Maria's face flushed with embarrassment. She lowered her gaze. I didn't mean for you to see that, sir. Every morning I carry it with me. It reminds me to stay strong, to be grateful. When I saw your safe open, I was afraid of what it meant, afraid someone might think I was tempted. So I left my prayer there to remind myself that no riches are worth losing who I am." Edward could not speak. He, a man surrounded by fortune, had never felt so poor in spirit. And here was Maria, with nothing but a prayer, richer than he could ever be. He dismissed the staff early that day and sat alone in his office, staring at the paper. For hours he thought of his past, every betrayal, every wound that had turned him into a man of suspicion, and then he thought of Maria, who faced hardship every day yet still chose integrity. For the first time in years, Edward wept. The next day he visited Maria's small home. It was a modest place in a forgotten part of the city. Through the window he saw her daughter, a little girl no older than 8, studying at the kitchen table with worn-out books. Maria answered the door, shocked to see her employer standing there. "Sir, is something wrong?" she asked nervously. Edward shook his head. "No, Maria, everything is right for the first time in a long time." He handed her a thick envelope, but this time it wasn't a test. Inside was a scholarship for her daughter, enough to cover her education for years to come. There was also the deed to the small house they lived in, now in Maria's name. Her hands trembled as she looked at him in disbelief. Why would you do this for me?" Edward's voice broke. "Because you reminded me of something I forgot. that trust and goodness still exist. You showed me that wealth is not in what we keep locked in safes, but in the honesty and love we carry in our hearts." Maria's eyes filled with tears as she hugged her daughter tightly. Edward turned away not because he regretted what he had done, but because he knew he could never repay the lesson she had given him. From that day forward, Edward changed. He treated his staff with kindness, gave generously to those in need, and lived not as a man guarding his wealth, but as a man grateful for the gift of trust. And every night, before locking his safe, he kept one item inside, not the jewels, not the cash, but Maria's prayer, now framed, a reminder that the truest treasures are those no thief can ever steal. And so, the millionaire who thought his riches defined him learned from a maid that the greatest wealth is honesty, and the most precious safe is the human heart.